certain comments in prompt, Copilot can build almost an entire feature for you. Hi everyone, hope that you all are doing well. Today we'll build a custom login register app using Spring Boot, Themeleaf and MySQL, almost entirely with the help of GitHub Copilot. We'll just give the prompt comment and the Copilot will write the code for us. But before we jump into the video's context, let me request you, if you find my videos knowledgeable, please support by liking, sharing and commenting on the video. And if new to the channel, please subscribe and press the bell icon. We have learned how to use GitHub Copilot for a basic REST app. If you haven't watched the video, the link is in the I button and in the description. Do watch that to learn how to set up GitHub Copilot for your IDE and start writing a first Hello World application. Now let's jump to today's video's context, that we'll be designing a login and registration application using GitHub Copilot. So I'm on my IDE, I'm on IntelliJ. Let me create a new project, file new, and let me say new project. Let me name this as GitHub Copilot login register. Right. So this is my name of the application. My packages are com.codewithraman.githubcopilot login register. Right. We'll be using Maven and I'll be requiring the JDK 21 and Java version is 17 and the packaging is jar. Let's go next and I'll be adding few of the dependencies. So some basic dependencies that we require here are Spring Web dependency. First let me add Spring Web dependency. Then as we'll be dealing with the database, so we also require JPA dependency and we'll be interacting with the database MySQL. So I would require a MySQL connector dependency as well, the driver of the MySQL. And then I require, as I'll be creating the security as well, so security login should be provided to the user. So we'll be also using Spring Security. So let me add Spring Security as well. And also the UI should be involved, as the person would be liking to register and log in. So we'll be using Themeleaf, right? So let me add Themeleaf as well. So these are my dependencies: Spring Web, Spring Data JPA, MySQL, Spring Security and Themeleaf. Let me create the project and let me import the project. So my project is ready and imported to the IDE. And this is my main application, right? GitHub Copilot register application, which has a main method. So we'll be creating a login and register app with the help of GitHub Copilot. We'll not be writing a line of code. We'll be just writing prompts or comment, and the code would be written by GitHub Copilot. So let's first start, as we'll be saving some data to the database. So what we can do is we can simply create a package first. So let me create a package of model, and in the model package we need a class. So what I'll do is I'll say Java and I'll say a user class. I'll be saving some user data, so I'll be creating a user class into a model package. So this is my class. So now from here onwards we'll be using the GitHub Copilot. So what I can do is I can simply remove this. Right, I'll have a blank kind of a class, right, just with the package, that where the my class is located. Now what I have to do is I have to ask GitHub Copilot to write my model or my entity class that needs to be saved to the database with some of the fields. So how I can do is you can do it with the comments as well, but I'll prefer that you do it with the inline chat of GitHub Copilot. So I'll be using inline chat of GitHub Copilot. I'll be putting it like alt enter, and when I alt enter, it will give me a option of open the GitHub Copilot inline chat. So if I click on enter, a chat will get opened. Here I have to define what is my goal of this class, what I need to basically create in this class. So how we can define is we simply say /, we'll simply say user entity class to register and login, right? And then we need to tell that what will be the field. So I'll say fields, and I'll say ID would be long, then username would be a string and password will be a string. Then I need to also tell that use the annotation. So we are using the annotations like @entity, @table, @ID and @generated value, right? So if I enter, so it will give me some suggestion by creating a class. So now you look at this, it has suggested me that you can put @entity, @table, and the name of the table could be user. Then we have the ID as long, username as string, and then we have some getters and setters. So if this code looks okay to you, you can copy this code and simply close this window, right? You can close this window, and you can simply paste the code here. So now my code is ready, right? So my entity class is ready. So this is how you can use GitHub Copilot to generate the code. So you might, the question might be in your, we are writing a lot more of comments or a lot more of prompts rather than we can write simply the line of code. But to remember that the things what we need to write, we can use our brains to write the logic, the boilerplate code or the code that will remain same always, that you shouldn't remember, right? For that you should use GitHub Copilot as a tool, and it will help you out, right? It will help you out in the long run. You just need to remember that what logic you need to write, right? So now our model class is ready. So now let me now create a new package. So I'll create a package of repository. So I have my repository package. I'll be creating a class here. I'll be creating an interface, sorry, and I'll be saying user repository, right? User repository. Now here also I'll be using GitHub Copilot. How I can use it? Again, Alt Enter. It will open my inline chat, and in the inline chat I have to define my goals. So how I can define my goals? I can say create a user repository, or rather a complete name, create a repository. I would say JPA repository, name user repository, right? And it should extend JPA repository, or rather it should extend, yes, JPA repository, and JPA repository should have some, the object should be a user object, and the type of the primary key is long, and a method find by username. If I give this goal, it will provide me a user repository. So let's see what it provides. So it says a interface user repository extends JPA repository, and it has a object user. User is coming from my model only. So you can see code with Raman, right? And then the primary key is long, right? And the method is find by username, right? So if I like this code, I can copy this, I can close this, I can paste the code here, right? So this is my code. Now, as I said that it is smart to use GitHub Copilot, but again, you should be vigilant while you are using the code, right? So now, the best practice while defining any of the bean in your code is to define that it is a bean, right? So the best practice that we use is we mark this as a repository, right? So let me say at the rate repository at the rate repository to define that this is a bean, right? So my user repository is ready, which extends JPA repository, and it has a method called as find by username, which is having a parameter as a username, right? So my repository is also created by GitHub Copilot, right? So now what I have to do is I have to create a service class, right? So let me go and let me create another package, and I'll say service, and in the service package I will require a new class. So let me create a class that is a user service class, right? Again, I'll be using the same functionality, alt enter, and open the inline chat, and I will be defining the goals here. Create a service class name user service, right? And now, like I need to define some of the goals here, right? So I'll say inject user repository, right? Inject user repository. The other goal could be the goal go, and I'll say implement save user, and we'll have the object as user method. Then we have another goal of using, we'll say encode the password using password encoder, right? And implement method find by user, should have a parameter called as username. Let's see what is the result. So this is very quick, right? You can see that how quick it is in implementing the things, right? So it has implemented the code, right? It has basically constructor injected user repository and password encoder, and created save user and find by username. So if I find this code okay, so let me copy this, and I am good at, let me close this, and now let me paste it here. So we have a password encoder which is encoding the password, and then we are saving the object to the database. Same way we have a find by username method, which is not getting used right now, which will get used from the controller level that we'll be defining. So there is some error. So it is saying password encoder. Password encoder error is coming because we haven't defined the password encoder bean. So that we have to define in the config right? But before that, before jumping into the config, I have to define a custom user, right? As we'll be I have to define a custom user service as we'll be dealing with the login of the user. So how that login will get processed, right? Who will be authenticating that the user is correct or not, right? So I will be requiring another class here. So I'll be requiring another class. So I'll say custom user details service, right? So this is my class. Here I have to define a goal of this class that will basically be load user by username method would be there in this method. So how I'll be defining it, I have to define some goals for this class. So let me say alt enter and I'll open the inline chat. So I'll define my goal as create service class, rather custom create a custom user detail service class which extends user details service. So user details service will provide the functionality of load user by username method. First goal is to create a service class that naming custom user details service which extends user details service. So I'll say it should be annotated with @service, right? Then we'll say check user repository using constructor. Using the constructor, you have to inject the user repository. Then we can have some of the goals for load user by username method. So we'll say the load user by username method should use user repository or find by username method. We have defined or else throw, but we haven't taken the optional as our in our repository. So I'll correct that. If user is not found, throw user not found exception. Return a user with user object using the username, password, and an empty authority list. So let me enter. So it will give me a class that will have an implementation of load user by username method. So you can see that we have a constructor injection of user repository, then we have load user by username method, and the implementation is correct. So let me copy this implementation. Like I don't have to remember, right? I don't have to remember the syntax of the code that what needs to be written here, right? Just my plain simple English comments can do it, right? So let me paste this here. So why there is an error? Okay, so this is my class, right? So you can see custom user detail service, which is implementing user detail service as our goal. And we have user repository which is injected using the constructor injection. We have load user by username method, and we are basically using find user by username which is defined in our user repository. And we are basically saying that get user so there is some miss in the functionality. So we thought that we'll be implementing using the optional. So if I say that I want to use I want to put this in a optional manner. So let me say I'll put it in an optional manner because that is better, right? If you have a null value, so that gets handled by optional, right? It doesn't throw a null pointer exception. So I'll say optional, right? So if I have said optional, then I have to correct in few of the areas. So here I need to say dot else and we'll say null, and also I'm using it in the user service. So I'll say dot else and we'll say null, right? So it is giving me suggestion. So now my code looks okay, right? So password encoder error would go when we have the config file. So now my custom user details is also ready, right? So now what I have to do is I have to jump to config file. So now let me create another package. So I'll say new package, and I'll say config. And in the config, I'll create a new class naming security config. So this is my class. I'll be using again some of the prompts to basically generate the class, right? So I have the prompt here. So I'll be pasting the prompt. I already created a prompt, and if you go by the prompt, it is like we have written a lot of line of code in the prompt, and the class that would get generated would have like lesser line of code rather than this. But again, I'll keep that point active that you are basically focusing on the logic. You know how to write the code, right? You know how to write the code. That is why you have become a developer. But again, I'm saying that you should know that how to write proper prompts, proper comments to generate the code, because this is the future, right? You won't be sitting and writing a new complete new feature of basic, like the basic root of the of a feature would not be written by you, right? It should be written by, it should get auto generated, right? It should get auto generated, and you should completely focus on the logic that you have to build. So this is my prompt for generating the security config. So I'm saying create a security config class in a Spring Boot app. It should be annotated with @configuration and enable method security. It should be a constructor accepting a user details service. Create a bean method to password encoder, returning a new bcrypt password encoder. Create a security filter chain method configured as use the injected custom user details. Permit all register login css.js file. Require authentication for any other request. Configure from form login page /login process URL /login default success URL dashboard failure URL login error. Configure logout for permit all and return HTTP build. So this is my complete prompt. So let me put it enter and it will give me some suggestions. So my file is getting got generated, and it has basically done the constructor injection of custom user details, and it has created a a password encoder bean, and then we have security filter chain method to basically govern our controller calls. So let me copy this code. Seems okay to me. Let me put it here. And yes, it doesn't have any error. And now I guess the error from here has also been gone. Right. So it is gone. So now what I have to do is, now we are good by while we have generated a lot of code by using GitHub. So now let me create another controller class, or rather let me first create a package. Let me first create a new package. I'll say controller, and in the controller class I'll generate a registration controller first. So this is my registration controller. Again, I'll be using the GitHub to generate my code. So I have to define few of the goals for this class. I'll say create registration controller with get call. Basically a get call will have /register as the mapping, and will return register registration HTML would get returned from here. And then we have a post mapping. We'll say /register only. Basically it will save the user to database using user service and redirect to /login. This is my goals that I have defined. So let me put this register into double quotes to tell that with this name a file would get existed in the future. Let's see what it generates. So okay, so it has generated /register and /register. It is injected. Look, I haven't suggested him to do the constructor injection of user service, but it has injected it. So the code has been written, right? So the code is right. So it has written the correct code. So let me copy this. Let me close this. Let me paste it here. So my registration module is also ready. So what are the errors it is showing? Okay, some differences. Why this gets copied, I don't know. So my registration class is also ready, right? So it has /register as a request mapping, and then we have methods of get mapping and a post mapping, right? So now I also require a new class. I'll be defining separate like goals for separate classes. So I'll say login controller, login controller, right? Again, I'll define some of the goals here. So I'll say alt enter, inline chat, and I don't need this. So I'll say here create login controller with /get mapping with get call /login should return login view, right? So it will be basically returning a login HTML from here, right? So let me copy this up. Let me close this. Let me paste it here. So this is my login controller, right? So it has /login and a get mapping a get code to basically return a login view. So now my login controller is also done. So now I have to define another controller that would be to basically show it to the user. So I'll say dashboard controller. So I have my dashboard controller. Let me use the inline chat. Basically, we will say create a dashboard controller with get slash dashboard. We'll say display the name of logged in user, right? So let's see what it generates. So we have the class. So we are using model, we are using authentication, security context. We are getting the user, the present user, which is getting logged in. And then we have the username for it. And then we are passing that username on the dashboard HTML. So let me copy this. So let me close this. Now we are good at the Java code. We have written the Java code here, right? Our Java code is complete. Now what? Now next is our HTMLs. So now the question would be that HTMLs can be generated. Yes, HTMLs can be generated using GitHub Copilot. So first let me generate a register HTML. So this is my register HTML. So how to define basically the goal that you basically want. So I'll say I'll remove this, and again I'll do the same, alt enter, and I have to define a goal, say a comment. I'll say like this theme leaf registration page with fields username and password, right? And this is my comment. So it should generate the HTML file for this. Yes, so it has generated an HTML file. So it says slash register, and we have a user object that will be getting passed, and we have the username and password here. Let me copy this. Let me close this. Let me put it here. We are generating it so quick, right? So that is what makes a difference. So I'll say login. Now my login HTML is being generated. I have to define some goals. So let me say alt enter, inline chat. I'll say this is, and I have to define the goal. We'll say theme login page or login page field for username and password, right? So we have this goal. So now we'll be having an HTML generated, right? So we have the HTML generated. So let me copy this up. Let me close this and let me put my HTML here. So we are very quick, right? We will be going next and we'll be doing another HTML, that is a dashboard HTML. Dashboard HTML, a view of the dashboard. So here we have to define a goal, right? Let's say alt enter, inline chat, then this, then this, then this. So we'll say the theme leaf dashboard page to display the message like welcome username with logout functionality. We have this. So let's say what HTML gets generated. So we have the HTML, right? So let me copy this up. Let me close this and let me put my HTML here. So we are good, right? We are done with the code part. Now let's go to the application.properties. We have to define some of the application properties. So we have the application.properties. Let me define a schema. So I'll say GitHub login register, right? So this will be my schema, right? So that I'll be defining in my MySQL workbench. So my password and username are defined. My driver is defined that I'm using MySQL. Show SQL is true and AutoDDL is on update, right? So it is like format SQL is also true. So if the query is big, so it will be shown in a formatted way. So for that, we have done this property as true as well. So this is my application. This is my URL for the database. So now first let me copy this. Let me copy this and let me first go and create the schema. Now we would have another schema for GitHub Copilot. Do we have? Yes, we have. So let me, sorry. So let me set this as default. So this is my default schema. So now what I can do is I can simply go to my main class and let me run my code. Let's see if I run my code, the things go well or not. So here the big thing is that we are quick on writing the code that we require every time while we are designing any feature, right? So if we are designing any Spring Boot app from the scratch, that will require registration and login. So those things are like those things could be done very quickly by just giving the prompt and the comments. So now my server is getting started. Let's see. So my table got created. So there was a issue. So the port is being used somewhere. Okay, the port is being used somewhere. So let me like define my port. Let me define my port. Let's say server.port. Server.port. And I'll say 8081. And let me run the application again. So my database has a table now. So let me refresh my database and see, or rather I'll refresh it from here. So my tables are there. So my application is also started, I guess. No, it hasn't. So my application has started, right? You can see started GitHub Copilot application. So now if I go to my browser and if I type in localhost 8080 and I'll say register. So this is my registration page. Let me type in a username as Raman and password as 1234 and let me say register. So it has taken me to the login page. Let me go to the database. Let me refresh it again and to my table, let me fetch the data. So you can see one row has been entered and the password is encoded, right? So everything goes well here. So let me say Raman and let me say the password as 1234 and let me try to log in. So it has logged me in, right? So it has logged me in and I'm on my dashboard. So it says welcome Raman. So this is coming from the dashboard where we defined the goal in the HTML as well. So now let me use the logout as well. So after logout, I'm on my login page, right? So this is how you can basically leverage GitHub Copilot to build a login register app with Spring Boot quickly. So it was very fast that we did build the application, right? With a well written comments and prompt, Copilot can build almost an entire feature for you. Right. So when you are writing your prompts, you should be very much specific. Specific to the goals that you want to achieve. You focus on the logic and it handles the boilerplate code. So the boilerplate code could be handled by GitHub Copilot, and you just have to focus on the logic, on building the logic in your applications. And I'm telling you, you should include GitHub Copilot to your environment, your coding environment. That will definitely help you out in generating the code very fast and removing your focus from unnecessary code and just focusing on the logic, right? So this was it from this video. Hope that you people might have gained some knowledge out of it. Please support by liking, sharing, and commenting on the video. If new to the channel, please subscribe and press the bell icon. Hope to see you in the next video. Till then, happy learning.